In a world where the smallest act of love can ignite life-changing miracles, this story unveils how sacrifice, courage, and kindness intertwine to transform lives. If these tales of heart and resilience move you, hit that subscribe button for more inspiring journeys. Now, let the journey begin. In a small, time-worn neighborhood on the outskirts of a bustling city, young Owen woke before dawn with a heavy heart. The early light revealed a modest apartment where every corner bore memories of happier times. His prized possession, a little red toy car with faded paint and chipped edges, rested carefully in his small hands. This toy had been a gift on his 4th birthday from his loving mother, Emily, when laughter filled their home and hope was abundant. Now, as the cool morning air seeped through their window, the car symbolized something far greater than childhood delight. It was a beacon of hope in a desperate struggle. For months, Emily's health had deteriorated. Once vibrant and full of life, she now lay weakened by an unyielding illness that drained her energy and spirit. The cost of her medication loomed like an insurmountable mountain. Late at night, while lying awake, Owen would overhear hushed conversations between his mother and the pharmacist, whispers of despair mixed with tentative hope. It was during one such night that Owen made a decision fueled by love and determination. He would take his only treasure and sell it to help secure the medicine his mother so desperately needed. Despite Emily's gentle pleas to remain safe at home, she had seen the fire in her son's eyes and understood that he must act. With a heart full of both courage and sorrow, Owen prepared himself for the day ahead. He gathered his few toys, each a memento of better times, and arranged them on a battered crate outside their apartment. But it was the red car that shone brightest among these relics. It was his most cherished possession, carrying the weight of every memory, every smile, and every moment of warmth they had once shared. Under a creaking canopy at the nearby flea market, Owen's small figure looked almost fragile against the backdrop of bustling stalls and chattering vendors. With a trembling voice that belied his tender age, he called out, "Car for sale. It's very special." His words floated in the air like a fragile prayer, desperate to be answered by fate. The market was a swirl of colors, sounds, and hurried exchanges. Shoppers strolled by, their eyes glued to their own concerns, while Owen's hopeful call was met mostly with indifferent glances or polite nods. Each dismissive remark stung him deeply. When a weary man in threadbare clothes paused to examine the toy and then muttered, $10. That's too steep. Before walking away, Owen's heart sank further. Yet, every rejection only strengthened his resolve. In his mind, the red car was not merely plastic and paint. It was a living promise of recovery, a sacrifice that could bring back his mother's smile and laughter. Owen's small hands gripped the toy tightly as he envisioned his mother receiving her medicine. He recalled the days when she would tuck him into bed and whisper stories of magical adventures. Those days now felt like echoes from another world, a world he was determined to reclaim. Each moment at the flea market was a battle against despair, and despite the relentless heat and the passing hours, his determination never wavered. His eyes, shining with both fear and resolve, spoke silently of a love so deep that it could challenge even the most formidable obstacles. As the day wore on and the market's hum continued, little Owen clung to the hope that someone would recognize the worth of his sacrifice. His heart told him that this small act could change their fate, that every dollar earned would be a step toward healing his mother's fragile body. In that crowded market, amidst the clamor of everyday life, his solitary stand became a symbol of boundless love, a love that transcended age and circumstance. With one last steadying breath, he made a silent promise to himself. No matter the cost, he would do whatever it took to bring light back into their lives. Owen's sacrifice, raw and unyielding, was the first chapter in a story of unexpected encounters and life-changing kindness, a story that would soon intertwine his fate with that of a man from a world far removed from his own. The flea market was a vibrant tapestry of sights and sounds, vendors haggling over antiques, families meandering through crowded aisles, and the constant murmur of life in motion. Amid this organized chaos stood Owen's humble stall, a simple crate draped with a faded cloth. The arrangement of his few toys spoke of care and nostalgia, yet it was the little red car that commanded attention, a beacon of hope amid the clutter. With each call of car for sale, it's very special. Owen poured out his quiet determination, his voice trembling as if every word carried the weight of the world. The market's busy atmosphere was unforgiving. Shoppers bustled by without a glance, immersed in their own conversations and transactions. Owen's plea seemed to vanish into the background noise. Occasionally, a passerby would slow, eyeing the collection with mild curiosity, but invariably their attention would wane as they continued on their way. Each time a potential customer dismissed his offering, the sting of rejection echoed in his heart. Yet, every moment of disheartening silence only deepened his resolve. He knew that his mother's life depended on the outcome of this modest sale. At one point, a man with a worn cap and weathered hands stopped at the stall, scrutinizing the toy as though weighing memories against monetary value. "How much for the car, kid?" the man asked with a tone that was both curious and detached. Owen, summoning every ounce of courage, answered with clarity, $10. The man's eyebrows arched in surprise. $10? For this toy? He murmured before shaking his head, mumbling something about its price before walking away. In that brief encounter, the market's indifferent pace seemed to grind against the edges of Owen's hope, yet he refused to yield. The relentless sun bore down on him as he continued to call out his offer. His throat felt parched, and his small hands began to tremble under the strain of the day's heat and effort. In the back of his mind, a troubling thought emerged. What if no one recognized the toy's true worth? What if the coin he needed to buy medicine never came? These doubts gnawed at him, but he pushed them aside, drawing strength from the vision of his mother's recovering smile. The red car was more than a mere plaything. It was the embodiment of his promise to do everything possible for the woman who had given him life. The crowd moved like a living river, indifferent to the silent struggle unfolding at the edge of their vibrant world. Each person who passed by seemed to take with them a fragment of Owen's hope, leaving him standing alone amidst a sea of unknown faces. Yet, even as despair threatened to seep into his spirit, he clutched the toy as if it were the key to unlocking a future free of pain. Every minute that ticked by only fueled his determination further, and he silently vowed to wait for the one person who might see beyond the worn exterior of a simple toy and recognize the extraordinary sacrifice it represented. The hustle and bustle of the flea market became a backdrop to a much more profound internal battle, a battle between the crushing weight of fear and the unyielding spark of hope. As the day wore on, the market's cacophony seemed to fade into a distant hum, and all that mattered was the singular promise Owen had made to himself and his ailing mother. In that solitary moment, his struggle was no longer about a toy for sale. It was about preserving the flicker of life and love that defined his existence. The red car glimmered in the sunlight as if imbued with a quiet magic, a magic that only a child's heart, full of hope and unbounded love, could truly understand. And so, amidst the relentless tide of indifferent passers-by, Owen stood firm, resolute in his mission to transform sacrifice into salvation. Amid the steady rhythm of the flea market's chaos, a change began to stir, one that would forever alter the course of Owen's small but determined life. As the afternoon sun cast elongated shadows over the stalls, a tall man in a sleek, tailored gray suit stepped into view. His confident gait and measured presence set him apart from the market's usual denizens. This man was James Reeves, a billionaire CEO known for his shrewd business acumen and a reputation for seldom pausing to observe the ordinary. Yet on this day, something about the small boy's unwavering stance caught his eye. James moved deliberately through the crowd until he found himself drawn to the modest stall where Owen was laboriously calling out his offer. He paused at a respectful distance, his keen eyes scanning the array of second-hand trinkets until they fell upon the little red car. In that moment, he perceived more than just a toy. He saw a reflection of a fierce, selfless determination that resonated deeply within him. With a fluid motion that belied his imposing stature, James approached the stall. His footsteps were soft yet authoritative, drawing curious glances from nearby vendors. As he neared, he could see the child's face, a mix of hope, exhaustion, and an unspoken courage that tugged at the edges of James's guarded heart. Instead of speaking from a position of superiority, James knelt down to meet Owen at eye level. His deep, calm voice broke through the ambient noise as he inquired, "What are you selling, young man?" Owen's small chest swelled with both pride and vulnerability as he held out the precious red car with trembling hands. "It's my favorite toy," he explained in a clear, honest tone that carried the weight of his commitment. "I need to sell it so I can buy medicine for my mom." In that simple statement, the entire depth of his sacrifice shone forth, raw and unadorned. James listened intently. As he regarded the toy, memories of his own childhood struggles and the sacrifices he had witnessed in others began to surface. Here was a boy, with eyes too wise for his age, offering his most treasured possession for love and survival. Moved by the purity of the act, James's mind raced with thoughts of how a single gesture could reshape lives. He knew that, in his world of boardrooms and endless deals, such heartfelt sincerity was a rarity, and one that he could not ignore. Gently, James asked, "How much are you asking for it?" With a determined yet fragile tone, Owen responded, $10. The simplicity of the price contrasted starkly with the magnitude of the sacrifice. James paused, weighing the cost not in dollars, but in the currency of love and need. After a moment of thoughtful silence, his expression softened, and he reached into the inner pocket of his suit. Without a hint of hesitation, he produced a small checkbook. In a careful flourish, he pinned a number that lit up the afternoon like a sudden burst of sunlight. $10,000. Owen's eyes widened in disbelief. The check felt impossibly heavy in his small hands, a symbol of a kindness so vast it nearly overwhelmed him. That's too much," he stammered, his voice trembling with awe and confusion. But James's reply was gentle and reassuring. "It is exactly what your car is worth," he said, his tone imbued with sincerity. "More than money can ever measure the value of your sacrifice." In that surreal moment, the flea market's noise faded into insignificance. All that remained was the quiet, steady heartbeat of a boy who had given everything for his mother's well-being, and a man who, for reasons he could scarcely articulate, felt compelled to rewrite the rules of his own life. James carefully tore the check from the pad and handed it over along with a soft pat on Owen's head, a gesture that spoke of promise and future hope. As the two shared a silent understanding, the world around them seemed to pause. Owen's small act of love had unexpectedly become the spark that would ignite a chain of events far beyond his imagining. In that fleeting encounter, two very different lives converged, setting in motion a journey that would test the boundaries of sacrifice, trust, and ultimately, the meaning of family. In the moments following that fateful encounter at the flea market, the bustling world around Owen seemed to shift. With trembling hands still clutching the check, the little boy's mind swirled with a mixture of disbelief and wonder. He had expected a few crumpled bills, a modest sum that might provide temporary relief. Instead, the check for $10,000 lay before him, a number so vast it was almost impossible to comprehend. The weight of that offer pressed upon him, yet it was laced with an inexplicable promise of hope. James Reeves, standing a few paces away in his crisp suit, regarded Owen with gentle intensity. His dark eyes shone with an emotion that was rarely seen amid the sterile world of corporate success, a raw empathy that had been awakened by the child's quiet determination. "This is for you, Owen," he said softly, as if imparting not merely money but a chance at a better future. His tone carried the gravity of his own life's experiences, hinting at battles fought behind closed doors and regrets long buried. For a long moment, the flea market's clamor receded into a distant murmur as the two exchanged words that were both simple and life-altering. Owen's voice, barely a whisper, echoed his unwavering resolve. "My mom needs this medicine. I want her to be okay." In that declaration, there was no trace of self-pity or hesitation, only a profound love that had already defined his every sacrifice. The sincerity of his words resonated with James, who silently vowed that no act of generosity should go unreciprocated. Gazing down at the red car, its chipped paint now bathed in the glow of afternoon light, James recalled memories of his own childhood, where small tokens of love had meant everything. This toy, seemingly insignificant to the untrained eye, held the power to transform despair into hope. "You have given more than you realize, Owen," James said, his voice steady and filled with conviction. This check is not just money. It's a promise that your sacrifice matters. I want you to take it to your mother, and I want you to remember that sometimes kindness finds us when we need it the most." Owen's eyes shimmered with tears as he accepted the check. His heart pounded in a rhythm that echoed the silent music of gratitude and hope. He had long imagined that his small world might someday be touched by something extraordinary, and in that moment, he understood that his act of sacrifice had set in motion a sequence of events that transcended the ordinary. With the check securely folded in his pocket, he mustered a trembling smile, a smile that bridged the gap between disbelief and the dawning realization of a better tomorrow. James lingered for a few more minutes, as if to imprint this extraordinary encounter in both their memories. Then, with a gentle nod that acknowledged the significance of the moment, he stepped back into the flow of the market. His departure was quiet yet profound, leaving behind an air of promise that would ripple through the lives of those left in its wake. For Owen, the red toy car was no longer a simple plaything. It had become a symbol of immense love and sacrifice. As he carefully tucked the check away, he made a silent vow to himself and to his ailing mother. He would transform this unexpected gift into the medicine that would restore her health, and in doing so, he would preserve the hope that burned so fiercely within his small, determined heart. Thus began a journey marked not by material wealth, but by the immeasurable power of kindness, a journey that would test the boundaries of fate, forge unlikely bonds, and ultimately reshape the destiny of a little boy and the woman he loved beyond measure. Later that evening, as twilight embraced the modest apartment, Emily sat alone at the worn kitchen table with a heavy silence filling the room. The day had been long and laborious, and the soft hum of the city outside provided a stark contrast to the turmoil within her heart. Her tired eyes fell upon an envelope, one that carried a weight far beyond its paper folds. Inside, the envelope held the check, a staggering $10,000 that had found its way into their lives in the most unexpected of manners. Emily's hands trembled as she ran her fingers over the check, unable to believe that such an enormous sum had been offered in exchange for her son's cherished toy. The irony was as piercing as it was beautiful. A sacrifice born of pure love had unlocked a treasure that seemed both miraculous and frightening. Her heart was torn between overwhelming gratitude and an abiding sense of unease. Accepting so much money from a stranger felt like stepping into a realm where life was no longer measured solely in love and sacrifice, but also in numbers and obligations she wasn't sure she could bear. Memories of brighter days flooded her mind, the sound of her laughter echoing in the small rooms of their apartment, the carefree joy that had once filled every corner, and the promise of a future she had once dared to dream about. Now, the check was a symbol of both hope and responsibility. It was a lifeline that could bring back her strength, yet it also carried with it the silent question of how one repays such a debt of kindness. As she sat there, Emily's thoughts meandered between gratitude and doubt. How could she ever measure up to the generosity that had been bestowed upon her family? The check, with its bold numbers, seemed to shine with the promise of a new beginning, yet it also reminded her of the fragility of her current existence. The decision to accept such a gift was not one taken lightly. Pride, independence, and a fierce determination to stand on her own had always been her guiding principles. And yet, the gravity of her illness and the desperate need for medicine forced her to confront the reality that sometimes life demanded help from unexpected sources. Tears welled in her eyes as she recalled the moment at the flea market. The image of little Owen, his eyes filled with a mix of determination and vulnerability, as he handed over his most prized possession in exchange for a future where hope might still bloom. That moment was etched in her memory like a sacred promise, one that transcended the boundaries of pride and indebtedness. In that small, selfless act, Emily recognized the unspoken truth that sometimes the greatest strength lies in accepting help when it is offered with genuine love. Determined not to let this moment slip into regret, Emily resolved to transform the gift into a stepping stone for a better life. The next morning, with a newfound sense of determination, she reached for the phone and began calling the design firms where she had once dreamed of working. One call led to another, and by midday, she had secured an interview at a small design firm that promised stability and hope, an opportunity to rebuild the pieces of a life that had been shattered by illness. Though uncertainty still lurked in the shadows of her thoughts, the check had ignited a spark within her, a spark of gratitude and a quiet determination to reclaim her independence. It was not a mere monetary sum, but a symbol of the extraordinary kindness that had touched their lives. With each word of encouragement that echoed in her memory, Emily vowed that she would repay that kindness not by clinging to charity, but by rising to the challenge and proving to herself and the world that she was capable of overcoming even the darkest of times. In that quiet moment at the kitchen table, as the night deepened around her and the envelope lay open before her, Emily felt a strange but welcome calm. The future was uncertain, and the path ahead was fraught with obstacles. Yet the generosity that had entered their lives was a reminder that hope often comes in unexpected forms. With the check as both a blessing and a challenge, Emily resolved to move forward, carrying with her the memory of Owen's sacrifice and the promise of a brighter tomorrow. Over the following days, as the city carried on with its relentless pace, James Reeves found himself unable to shake the image of the little boy and his brave mother from his mind. In the polished corridors of his corporate life, surrounded by the familiar rhythm of boardroom meetings and decisive negotiations, his thoughts kept drifting back to that humble flea market stand and the poignant scene that had unfolded there. Each morning, as he sipped his coffee in a sleek high-rise office, James felt an uncharacteristic tug, a yearning to understand the true impact of his unexpected act of kindness. Despite his reputation as a man who rarely allowed sentiment to interfere with business, he could not help but wonder how that single check had altered the course of Emily and Owen's lives. Did the money help secure the medicine? Had it given Emily the strength to reclaim the laughter that had once filled their home? These questions echoed in his mind, stirring emotions he had long kept under lock and key. James's curiosity grew into a quiet obsession. Late at night, in the solitude of his luxurious apartment, he found himself scrolling through memories of his own childhood and the sacrifices made by those he had once admired. The recollection of Owen's small voice, so determined, so resolute, haunted him, and he began to feel a responsibility that extended far beyond the confines of a single transaction. In his world of calculated risk and immense wealth, the simplicity of a child's love and the raw purity of sacrifice had become a stark reminder that true value was measured not in numbers, but in moments of genuine humanity. Unable to ignore these feelings any longer, James resolved to learn more about the family whose lives had been touched by his generosity. With deliberate care, he arranged for someone from his office to discreetly inquire about the whereabouts of Emily and Owen. He did not wish to intrude on their lives without invitation, but a subtle curiosity had taken root in his heart. Over the following days, he received fragments of information, snippets of conversation from people who had witnessed the remarkable transformation in a modest apartment where hope was being slowly rekindled. Emily had found work at a small design firm, and Owen's quiet determination continued to inspire those around him. Each piece of news ignited further questions. In quiet moments of reflection, James wondered if the money had truly been enough, not just to cover the cost of medicine, but to mend the deeper fractures that had formed in their lives over the months of struggle. He recalled the fleeting moment when he had knelt before Owen, meeting the boy's eyes with a promise of hope, and realized that his gesture had been more than a simple act of charity. It had been a call to re-examine his own life, to consider whether success meant something more than profit and power. As the days passed, James found himself increasingly conflicted. Part of him longed to step back into the lives of Emily and Owen, to offer guidance, and perhaps even friendship. Yet the boundaries of his own world felt so vast compared to the quiet, resilient life of the small family. Each news update about their progress tugged at him, a reminder that every act of kindness has its ripple effect, transforming lives in ways that are often invisible to the unobservant eye. Late one evening, as rain gently pattered against the expansive windows of his apartment, James made a decision. He resolved that he would find a way to meet Emily and Owen again, not to impose upon them, but to see with his own eyes the impact of a small sacrifice that had grown into something far larger than either he or they could have anticipated. In that contemplative moment, amid the soft patter of rain and the hum of city life outside, He knew that his next steps would redefine the boundaries between the world of business and the realm of genuine human connection. In the days following his discreet inquiry, James Reeves found himself drawn toward a simple, sunlit neighborhood where Emily and Owen now lived. The information he'd gathered had painted a picture of a modest yet resilient life. Emily had found work at a local design firm, and her small apartment echoed with a renewed sense of hope. Determined to see the fruits of his earlier act of kindness, James arranged a visit that he hoped would bring reassurance to his conflicted heart. On a crisp morning, with the early light softening the edges of the quiet street, James arrived unannounced at the modest apartment building. His presence, though incongruous with the worn brick facade and humble surroundings, was tempered by a sincere desire to help rather than to intrude. As he stepped through the narrow hallway, memories of that afternoon at the flea market, Owen's determined eyes and the silent promise exchanged flashed vividly in his mind. Now, the thought of reuniting with them filled him with a mix of anticipation and quiet trepidation. At the apartment's door, he hesitated before gently knocking. The sound echoed softly down the hall, and moments later, the door opened to reveal Emily, whose eyes widened in surprise at the sight of the impeccably dressed man on her threshold. There was a moment of silent exchange, a blend of curiosity, wariness, and an unspoken recognition of something extraordinary. "Mr. Reeves?" she inquired softly, uncertain whether to invite him in or to maintain a cautious distance. James offered a warm, genuine smile. "I hope I'm not intruding, but I wanted to see how you and Owen are doing. I've been thinking about that day at the market and hoped I could help in any way." His tone was both respectful and earnest, leaving no trace of the usual corporate reserve he was known for. Inside, the apartment was simple but filled with a palpable sense of hope. Owen, who had been playing with a set of handmade toys, looked up with curious eyes. When he saw James, a slow smile spread across his face, a smile that radiated warmth and acceptance. In that moment, the three of them shared a quiet communion, each understanding that fate had woven their lives together for a purpose greater than mere coincidence. As they sat around a small kitchen table, Emily began to recount how the generous check had not only afforded her the medicine, but had also given her the courage to pursue a stable job at the design firm. She spoke of long, determined hours and the challenges of starting anew, but her voice was lightened by hope. Owen chimed in with childlike enthusiasm, describing the little adventures he embarked on every day and how he felt that the check had transformed their lives. James listened intently, his heart swelling with the realization that his single act of kindness had rippled outward, changing lives in ways he had never imagined. The conversation soon drifted into a comfortable exchange of stories. James recounted subtle lessons from his own childhood, times when even the smallest act of generosity had reshaped his perspective. Emily, in turn, shared her dreams of reclaiming her independence and building a future where her family would never again be at the mercy of circumstance. Owen's bright laughter and candid questions about the world added a joyful, unguarded note to the meeting. What began as a tentative reunion gradually evolved into a promise of new beginnings. James offered advice and practical support, urging Emily to consider creative ways to expand her skills at work. He also extended an invitation for them to join him for dinner on a regular basis, a gesture that, while simple, hinted at the possibility of an enduring bond beyond the transactional. Though wary of too much charity and conscious of her hard-earned pride, Emily sensed that this was not about indebtedness, but about forging genuine connections. By the time the morning sun had climbed high into a clear blue sky, an unspoken pact had been formed between them. Their encounter was not merely a reunion. It was the commencement of a transformation that promised hope, mutual respect, and the gentle weaving of a new family tapestry. As James stepped out of the apartment later that day, he carried with him the reassuring knowledge that sometimes the most unexpected meetings could plant the seeds for an entirely new chapter in life. That very evening, after the tender reunion with James Reeves had ended, Emily sat by the window in her modest apartment, her eyes fixed on the glowing remnants of twilight. The air was cool, carrying with it the soft hum of distant traffic and the memories of a day that had altered her life in ways she was only beginning to understand. In her hands, she held the check, a tangible reminder of the unexpected kindness that had arrived on that fateful day. Its crisp paper and bold numbers represented more than money. They carried a weight of responsibility and a deep yearning to repay the gift that had so inexplicably transformed their world. Emily's mind whirled with conflicting emotions. On one hand, gratitude swelled within her, mingling with hope for the future. On the other, a stubborn pride and fierce independence reminded her that she had never wanted to owe anyone. For years, she had struggled alone, fighting not only her illness but also the pervasive doubt that had shadowed her every step. Accepting this generous offer had forced her to confront her vulnerabilities. But now, as the night deepened, Emily resolved that she would not allow this kindness to become a crutch. Instead, she would use it as a stepping stone to reclaim the life she once dreamed of, a life filled with dignity, creativity, and self-reliance. The next morning, Emily awoke with a renewed determination. She dialed the number of a small design firm she had long admired but had never dared to pursue a position at. With her voice steadied by a quiet inner resolve, she explained her situation, sharing her experience of hardship and hope with a clarity that resonated with the person on the other end of the line. Her words were honest, unadorned by pretense, and they carried the earnest belief that her skills and passion deserved a chance. The firm, moved by her sincerity and bolstered by the promise of someone eager to rebuild, invited her for an interview later that day. As she prepared for the meeting, Emily carefully tucked the check away in a small envelope, not as a token of indebtedness, but as a symbol of the turning point in her life. Each step she took toward the interview was heavy with the memory of Owen's sacrifice, a child's unwavering love that had set this chain of events in motion. She recalled the way Owen had clutched the red toy car, his eyes alight with hope, and she vowed to honor his faith in her by forging a future where they both could thrive. The interview itself was a whirlwind of gentle questions and reassuring smiles. The firm's manager admired not only Emily's portfolio, but also the fortitude that shone through every word she spoke. It wasn't long before she was offered a position, a modest role that promised stability and the opportunity to grow. That very afternoon, as she stepped out of the building with a lightness in her step, Emily allowed herself a small smile. She was beginning to understand that accepting help did not diminish her strength. Instead, it provided the means to rebuild her life on her own terms. Yet, even as she embraced this newfound chapter, Emily's thoughts frequently drifted back to the man who had changed everything. James Reeves remained an enigma, a stranger who had stepped into their lives at the most critical moment. While part of her still wrestled with the notion of repaying such a kindness, she also recognized that genuine gratitude often comes with the desire to give back. Determined not to let the gift be a source of shame or dependency, Emily resolved to repay it through hard work, integrity, and by nurturing the hope that now blossomed in their home. That evening, as she sat at the small kitchen table with Owen quietly drawing beside her, Emily's heart softened with resolve. She knew that life would continue to test her, that there would be moments of fear and uncertainty. But in that very moment, she also recognized that every sacrifice and every act of kindness was part of a larger tapestry, a tapestry woven from threads of love, resilience, and the relentless pursuit of a better tomorrow. And with that understanding, Emily embraced the challenge, determined to transform the generous gift into a foundation for a life that honored both her own strength and the selfless sacrifice of her little boy. In the weeks that followed, the lives of Emily, Owen, and James began to intertwine in ways that defied the boundaries of their former worlds. Dinner invitations turned into regular gatherings where the conversation flowed freely, a blend of shared dreams, humble confessions, and laughter that echoed through Emily's modest apartment. At these meals, the clink of cutlery and the soft hum of familial chatter formed the soundtrack to a slowly blossoming friendship. James, who was so accustomed to the brisk, impersonal pace of corporate meetings, found himself delighting in the simplicity of these gatherings. He listened intently as Emily recounted her challenges and small triumphs at the design firm, her voice carrying a mix of determination and vulnerability that deeply moved him. Owen, with the candid enthusiasm of childhood, peppered the conversation with innocent questions about everything from superheroes to the stars, his laughter a gentle reminder that hope can be found in the smallest moments. As the weeks turned to months, the trio's bond grew stronger. What started as a cautious interaction evolved into a comfortable closeness. James began offering advice that went beyond business strategies, practical tips for managing finances, insights on balancing work and personal life, and even gentle reminders to take moments for self-care. Emily, initially hesitant to let anyone in too deeply, slowly began to trust James's guidance. She admired his calm confidence and the way he made her feel seen, not as a charity case, but as an equal with a wealth of potential waiting to be unlocked. For Owen, the change was even more profound. The man he had once seen as an unfamiliar figure at the flea market had now become a cherished part of their daily routine. At school, his classmates marveled at his newfound happiness and the way his eyes sparkled with the knowledge that he was surrounded by love. At home, he would excitedly recount little adventures and shared moments with James, who patiently listened and offered his own humorous anecdotes. The warmth of these interactions not only softened the edge of hardship in their lives, but also began to knit a tapestry of memories that promised a brighter future. Evenings became a time of storytelling, where Emily and James would share lessons from their past, while Owen played nearby. In these quiet moments, amidst the soft glow of table lamps and the gentle clatter of dinnerware, an unspoken understanding grew. They were not merely a trio bound by a single act of fate. They were becoming a family built not on blood alone, but on shared experiences, mutual respect, and the willingness to open one's heart to unexpected love. For James, these gatherings slowly chipped away at the walls he had built around himself. The rigid persona of the billionaire CEO softened into a man who cherished genuine human connection over corporate conquests. With every laugh shared, every story told, and every moment of silent understanding, he discovered a depth of feeling that he had long thought lost in the pursuit of success. The gentle vulnerability of Emily, the unwavering optimism of Owen, and the quiet moments of companionship all combined to forge a bond that transcended the differences in their backgrounds. As autumn's cool breezes began to replace the lingering warmth of summer, the group found themselves planning small outings, picnics in the park, visits to art galleries, and quiet evenings at home filled with shared meals and candid conversations. Each event brought them closer, and with every passing day, the promise of a shared future became less a matter of circumstance and more a conscious choice. It was a choice to let go of past fears, to embrace the beauty of imperfection, and to trust that kindness, when nurtured, could indeed mend even the deepest wounds. In the soft embrace of these growing connections, the trio discovered that the true measure of wealth was not found in bank balances or material possessions, but in the richness of their shared lives, a lesson that each of them carried with newfound gratitude. The once fragmented pieces of their lives were slowly coming together, painting a picture of hope, resilience, and the unbreakable bonds of a family that had chosen each other. As the seasons changed and winter crept in, a subtle shift began to disturb the once harmonious rhythm of their newfound togetherness. While the closeness they had built grew deeper, James Reeves found himself wrestling with a familiar, unsettling emotion: fear. Despite the warmth he felt when surrounded by Emily and Owen, echoes of past heartaches and betrayals haunted his thoughts. The very notion of allowing himself to become too attached, the vulnerability of investing his heart, reawakened a long-dormant anxiety. At first, it was barely noticeable. A missed dinner here, a hurried excuse there. But as the weeks passed, the frequency of these absences grew. James began to cancel their regular dinner invitations, citing unexpected business trips and pressing obligations. The once predictable pattern of shared meals and laughter gradually gave way to long, silent gaps where his presence was sorely missed. Emily, whose own life had already weathered many storms, sensed the growing distance with a mixture of sadness and resignation. Owen, with his innocent perception of the world, noticed the changes most acutely. The boy's bright eyes dimmed slightly with each time James's chair at the dinner table remained empty. One crisp evening, as they sat together in the living room listening to the wind howl outside, Owen quietly asked, "Why aren't you coming, Mr. Reeves? I miss you." His voice, laden with the simplicity of childhood longing, tugged at Emily's heart. She exchanged a worried glance with James, a glance that spoke of unspoken truths and the silent fear of losing the warmth that had become the anchor of their small family. For his part, James wrestled with a tumult of conflicting desires. On one hand, he yearned to be with them, to feel the authentic connection that had begun to mend his guarded heart. On the other, the ghosts of past wounds urged him to retreat, to protect himself from the possibility of being hurt once more. Each time he excused himself, a piece of him felt like it was tearing away, yet the security of familiar isolation called to him with a siren's song. Emily tried to bridge the growing gap with gentle reminders of shared memories and whispered assurances that she, too, wished for James to stay. Yet, her attempts were met with quiet explanations of business emergencies and unforeseen obligations. With every excuse, the distance between them grew ever so slightly, a slow drift that neither of them fully comprehended until it was already taking shape. In quiet moments after Owen had gone to bed, Emily would sit alone in the dim light of the living room, clutching an old photograph of happier times. The picture showed a moment of unguarded laughter, a snapshot of the three of them united by hope and promise. It was in these moments of solitude that the ache of uncertainty and fear crept into her heart. She wondered if the bond they had nurtured was fragile, if the memory of that fateful day at the flea market was slipping away like a half-remembered dream. James, too, found himself awake late into the night, haunted by thoughts of what might be lost if he allowed himself to truly open up. The allure of his old life, a life where emotional investments were measured in calculated risks rather than heartfelt connections, tugged at him, urging him to pull back even when every fiber of his being screamed to stay. The dichotomy of his desire for closeness and the instinct for self-preservation became an internal battle that he could neither ignore nor easily resolve. As winter's chill deepened, the once familiar warmth of shared moments was replaced by an unspoken tension. The space between them grew, filled with silent questions and the fear that perhaps the fragile bond they had built might shatter under the weight of unspoken regrets. The love that had once united them now hung in a precarious balance, each missed dinner and each unexplained absence a reminder that even the strongest connections could be threatened by fear. One frosty evening, when the weight of silence felt almost unbearable, little Owen decided that he had had enough. As he sat at the kitchen table, his eyes fixed on the empty chair where James's presence was sorely missed, the innocence of childhood transformed into a determination that belied his years. With a courage that could only be born from pure, unfiltered love, he marched into the living room where James was quietly reading, his face partly hidden in shadow. "Mr. Reeves," Owen began in a small but resolute voice, "why don't you come to dinner anymore? I miss you. Mom misses you too." His words cut through the quiet like a bell, echoing in the stillness of the room. For a long, heavy moment, James simply looked down at the earnest face before him. The weight of the child's simple truth penetrated the fortress of guarded feelings he had built around his heart. In that moment, all the excuses, the business trips, and the invisible barriers crumbled before the purity of Owen's plea. I'm sorry, Owen," James stammered, his voice rough with the ache of suppressed emotions. "I didn't mean to hurt you." But Owen, with a wisdom that belied his tender age, shook his head gently. "You always say you have to go, but if you love us, you'll stay." His words, so unadorned and direct, resonated deeply with James. Unable to meet the small boy's determined gaze, James's throat tightened. In that raw exchange, he realized that the boy's innocent honesty was not a demand but a desperate plea for connection, a plea that cut to the very core of his conflicting nature. Meanwhile, Emily, who had been listening from the doorway, stepped forward. "James," she said softly, "we need you. I need you. We all do." Her voice, though gentle, carried the strength of a woman who had fought hard for every bit of hope in her life. As the conversation unfolded in the quiet room, James found himself at a crossroads. The child's simple, yet profound, statement, "If you love us, you'll stay," brought tears to his eyes. It was a moment of clarity, the realization that no amount of business success or personal armor could replace the warmth of genuine human connection. The fortress he had built around himself began to crumble, piece by piece, as he acknowledged that fear of vulnerability had kept him away from the people who truly mattered. In that poignant exchange, the three of them sat together, a fragile yet resilient family united by love and the willingness to confront their deepest fears. James, with a trembling hand, reached out and gently took Owen's small hand in his. "You're right," he whispered, his voice earnest and trembling with newfound resolve. "I'm sorry, both of you. I won't run away again." In that moment, the unspoken tension that had grown over the weeks began to dissolve, replaced by the promise of a fresh start. A promise that the love they all shared would guide them through even the darkest times. The air in the room, once heavy with uncertainty, now seemed lighter, filled with the hope that comes from facing one's fears head-on. Owen's determined gaze shone with the brilliance of a child who had won a small but mighty battle, and Emily's eyes glistened with relief and cautious optimism. That evening marked a turning point, a moment when fear was met with courage, and the bonds of love were reforged with even greater strength. In the weeks that followed the heartfelt confrontation, a slow but steady change began to manifest in James Reeves's life. The warmth of those honest moments with Emily and Owen lingered long after the conversation ended, gradually reshaping his inner world. Each day, as he returned to his daily routine, he carried with him the memory of Owen's brave words and Emily's gentle plea, a reminder that the true measure of his success was not in boardroom victories, but in the quality of the relationships he nurtured. James made a conscious decision. He would no longer allow the fear of vulnerability to dictate his actions. He began by re-establishing a routine that honored the time he now shared with Emily and Owen. Every evening, he set aside time for a warm cup of tea at their modest dining table, listening attentively as Owen excitedly recounted the day's small adventures, or as Emily described her creative breakthroughs at work. These moments, once taken for granted, became treasured rituals that grounded him in a reality far removed from the sterile corridors of corporate power. As the seasons changed once more, the transformation in James became increasingly evident. No longer did he disappear on mysterious business trips or vanish into the shadows of his old life. Instead, he became a constant presence, someone who arrived with an earnest smile, shared genuine laughter, and even planned quiet outings that allowed the trio to explore the simple pleasures of life together. Each visit was an affirmation that he was committed to overcoming his fears and embracing the love that had once seemed too fragile to hold. One brisk afternoon, while the three sat on a park bench beneath a canopy of autumn leaves, James reflected on how far they had come. The crisp air, the gentle rustle of fallen leaves, and the sound of children playing in the distance all served as a reminder that life, with all its uncertainties, was meant to be shared. In that moment, James realized that the greatest risks were not in forging ahead alone, but in shutting oneself off from the possibility of joy. He had learned that vulnerability, though frightening, was the gateway to profound human connection, and he no longer wanted to live behind the walls he had so carefully constructed. Emily, ever perceptive, noticed the subtle shifts in his demeanor. Her eyes, filled with cautious hope, often met his with an unspoken understanding, a silent conversation about the promise of a future built on trust rather than fear. Owen, blissfully unaware of the complexities that had once troubled his guardian, simply smiled at the man who now seemed to have found his place in their little world. And so, as winter slowly gave way to the tender bloom of early spring, the three of them moved forward together. James had learned that love was worth every risk, every vulnerability, and that the simple act of staying, of showing up for those who matter most, was the most courageous thing he could ever do. His life, once defined by cold calculations and guarded ambitions, was now imbued with warmth, laughter, and the promise of tomorrow. Under a clear sky painted with the soft hues of a new dawn, Emily, Owen, and James stood together at the threshold of a modest home that they now called their own. Their journey, marked by sacrifice, struggle, unexpected encounters, and the slow healing of old wounds, had culminated in a new beginning. In this final chapter, the three looked back on the long, winding road that had brought them together and ahead to the future they would build as a family. Emily's eyes shone with quiet determination. The hardships of the past had taught her that true strength lies in accepting help and in daring to hope again. With every brushstroke of design at her newfound job, she reclaimed not just her livelihood, but her identity. Owen, whose tender heart had sparked this transformation with his selfless sacrifice, now laughed freely and dreamed boldly of adventures yet to come. And James, once haunted by the ghosts of lost love and guarded ambitions, discovered that vulnerability was not a weakness but the pathway to a richer, fuller life. Their days became a symphony of shared meals, heartfelt conversations, and the gentle rhythm of togetherness. The memories of the flea market, of a little red toy car and a life-changing check, remained etched in their hearts as a reminder that even in the darkest moments, hope could bloom. Through winter's chill and spring's gentle awakening, they learned that family was not defined by blood alone, but by the courage to embrace love in all its unpredictable forms. On that special day, as they gathered with close friends and neighbors to celebrate a small, intimate wedding, one that united not only Emily and James, but the tapestry of lives woven together by fate, they realized that every tear shed, every moment of fear, and every brave act of sacrifice had led them here. In that warm embrace of community and shared joy, the promise of a new chapter was more than a hopeful dream. It was a living, breathing testament to the power of kindness, resilience, and the beauty of love. Standing together on the sunlit porch, the trio looked toward the horizon with gratitude and excitement. Their hearts, once burdened by uncertainty, now beat in unison with the promise of tomorrow, a tomorrow where every sacrifice would be honored, every fear would be faced, and every moment of togetherness would shine as a beacon of hope. And so, with hands intertwined and eyes fixed on the future, they stepped forward into a life that was imperfect yet deeply real, a life where love was not merely a word, but a shared journey that began anew with every sunrise. Thank you so much for watching until the very end of this story. If it touched your heart or made you think differently about love, family, and second chances, please take a moment to give this video a like. Your support means the world and helps us continue sharing meaningful stories like this one. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you never miss an inspiring tale. And I'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment below and let's talk about it. Your words might just inspire the next story.